So the next question is from Andrew in Johannesburg in South Africa. And Andrew says, hi, Mark. There are two components to the smoking addiction. There is the psychological component, which we are addressing in this course in detail, and there is the physical addiction to the nicotine in the cigarettes. How do your clients generally handle the physical addiction to the nicotine once they've become non-smokers psychologically? Please discuss and elaborate on how this part of the process is best handled by therapist and client in your experience. In brackets, my brother is going to be my first guinea pig, so I want to be able to advise him on the easiest way to do the physical process as well as the psychological. Thanks, Andrew. Okay, so Andrew's going to see his brother Colleen, so so it's an answer to your earlier question. Okay, Andrew, so thanks for this. And I'm going to give quite a sort of in-depth answer to this, okay? And it may seem at first as if I've gone off on a tangent, but I will come back to what we're talking about. So if we think about it, according to the World Health Organization, 1 billion people are predicted to be killed by smoking in the 21st century, which will be 10 times the amount killed in the 20th century. It was about 100 million people were killed by smoking in the 20th century, and 1 billion this century. And we, of course, we see a lot in the news about militants, wearing suicide belts and destroying their own lives and the lives of others, which of course is terrible. But if we thought that 1 billion people would do that in this century, then the outcry, of course, would be huge. 1 billion people prepared to throw their lives away for some cause. Now, smokers throwing down their lives don't just give away their own lives, of course, but they can harm the lives of people around them, people who care about them, people who are dependent on them in some way. Okay. So the analogy isn't entirely unsuitable. So in order to be prepared to sacrifice yourself or even injure yourself, okay, you need to have swallowed some beliefs. Okay, so people who, suicide bombers, they don't not believe anything. They don't not believe in some cause. They have a set of beliefs which are propelling them to act in these destructive ways. Kamikaze pilots in World War II believed that their death would repay the debt they owed to their families and their emperor. Okay, other people have been convinced that in giving up their lives they'll be granted virgins in paradise or whatever. Okay, so the point, in order to be prepared to throw away your life, you need to have swallowed some beliefs, some dogma that squares it in some way in your mind. Okay, often those beliefs will sit in your unconscious mind determining your behavior, but those beliefs will be there somewhere, okay, that seem to make it okay on one level. So this 1 billion people prepared to lay down their lives potentially for the cause, and the cause of course is the tobacco industry profits. Okay, what beliefs have they swallowed? Okay, and we need to address these beliefs potentially. Some people have swallowed them more than others. Okay, so there are the standard smoking beliefs, like smoking gives you a more interesting persona. It's cool, or it's more bohemian, or whatever, and that's generally a kind of adolescent belief, but it can stick around in the back of someone's psyche even as they get older. Sometimes they'll kind of begrudgingly admit that they still feel that smokers are somehow more exciting or interesting, or sort of counterculture than non-smokers. Okay, even though they're contributing to this great culture of big business. Okay, another belief may be a form of denial, that it's not smoking that's rotting their lungs. I've had clients sit there in front of me with grey sagging skin, coughing their guts up, looking twice their age, swearing blind that the smoking is playing no part in their health at all. Okay, other beliefs include that that they could get run over by a bus tomorrow, so why not smoke? You've got to die of something. Okay, and around 1 in 20,000 people get run over by a bus and killed, whereas 1 in 2 smokers who smoke 20 a day are killed by the smoking. Okay, so again, that belief is kind of erroneous. It doesn't really hold water. Okay. Another belief is that smoking is needed to give you something to do with your hands. Okay, as if we evolved as primates, we needed something to do with our hands, and tool making wasn't enough, so we had to invent the cigarette. These are hands that rely on the bloodstream to keep them active, the very blood flow that smoking is weakening. Okay, another one is that smoking relaxes them. Okay, which, as a stimulant isn't really a belief that stands up either, and as evidence it seems to be pointing toward now, smoking is also implicated in poorer mental health, indicating that smoking isn't as good for the welfare of the mind as some smokers have kind of been led to believe. Okay, that it relaxes them and gives them a sense of well-being and so forth. Okay, yet another belief, and this finally relates to your question, Andrew, is that smoking is highly physically addictive. Okay, but smokers contradict this belief by their own experience. So they might sleep many hours without being woken up by the need to smoke. Or one guy who smoked 60 a day, I asked for. It's always important to ask for exception times. When don't you feel the need to smoke? Okay, and he said when he went to visit his brother in hospital, his brother was dying. He didn't even think about it. He'd sit with his brother for hours and hours and hours. This was a guy who smoked 60 a day, and he'd visit his brother in hospital, and he wouldn't even, because you weren't allowed to smoke, and it wasn't, appropriate to smoke in front of his brother. He wouldn't even think about it. Okay, so where's the physical addiction gone? Or they, a person might get on a long haul flight. Okay, and it might be a 12-hour flight, and because they don't have the psychological association with smoking on an aeroplane, the need doesn't really arise until they get to a smoking lounge, in the airport of their destination. Or they might go to a cinema, and because the smoking association isn't there, they only feel a need to smoke when they land at the airport, or leave the cinema after the movie or whatever. So that contradicts the belief of physical addiction and shows how much of so-called physical addiction or addictions are really just, learned association, just like a Pavlov's dog. They were sort of trained to salivate when they heard bells. Okay, so at first they were fed every time they heard a bell, and eventually they weren't fed, but they still salivated on hearing a bell. There's no natural association between getting ready to eat and hearing a bell, but it had been learned into them. Okay, so they had a sort of physical response, but it was really through a psychological avenue, if you like. So, I'll often say to a smoker, as a way of preempting the physical addiction belief, that if I were, crazy enough to click my fingers 1,000 times a day for 20 years, okay, imagine me doing that, apart from everybody avoiding me, okay, if I did that every time I had a cup of coffee, I'd be, clicking my fingers, every time I took a break at work, I'd be clicking my fingers, every time I met up with certain friends, every time after a meal, I'd be clicking my fingers at these times, pretty soon I'd feel that there was some kind of natural association between drinking coffee and finger clicking, or standing outside in the rain at work and clicking my fingers with a bunch of other people clicking their fingers, And what's more, it might feel odd to stop clicking my fingers, okay, as if it was some kind of physical need rather than just a learned bunch of associations and psychological expectancies. Okay, so we have to be very careful not to necessarily buy in to the very beliefs that are enabling people to be prepared on some level to lay down their lives for this particular cause. Because nicotine leaves the body fast. Around 24 hours, you're starting to get clean of it, of the nicotine on a chemical level. So after that, all you have is association, which is a psychological expectation, not a physical need. So I frame the promptings of the habitual smoking expectancies as the ex-partner calling you up and trying it on, trying to manipulate you back. Okay, so I don't suggest to a smoker that they'll leave here today and they'll forget about it entirely and they won't have any promptings. But I'll externalize those promptings. I won't use the metaphor of physical addiction, so they're coming from it's your body, trying to trip you up. It's from outside of them. Just as an ex-abusive partner who used to steal your money and your self-esteem and your health and so forth, you were a good deal for that person. They got a lot from you, and of course they're going to try and ring you up. Of course they're going to try and get you back, maybe when you're bored one night, or maybe you're a bit lonely or a bit tired or a bit drunk. They'll call you up and they'll just try to convince you. But what you're going to find is that when they do that, then their voice is going to seem very, very weak, okay, and quiet. And the more you refuse them, the more you stand up to that, okay, the weaker they're going to become, and they're going to go find someone else to manipulate and to bully and to manhandle. Okay, so sometimes I'll reframe the idea of withdrawal as indicators of healing as well. But mainly, I'll keep to the idea of a con man or a con woman trying to get you back because you're a good deal, you're a good bet for it. It gets all these things: your health, your money, your looks, your youth, and the years off the end of your life. And maybe all you got was something to do with your hands in return for the deal. Okay. So no wonder it tries to con you back, and it will do that, but you'll be ready for it. And you can mentally rehearse with them standing up to it when it tries to do this. Okay. So this talk is aimed at preparing people for urges by externalizing them and negating the need for the physical addiction idea, which is a belief of helplessness in a sense. I'm enthralled to my physical addiction. I'm helpless to it. So I think we need to be very, very careful about buying into that idea as much as some people have.